Hello, here is Alex from BC Designer, and in this video we're going to talk about measuring innovations, something that many people think is hard to measure, hard to quantify, but actually there are certain approaches that help us to measure and quantify and respectively plan innovations and align some innovative initiatives with a business strategy. And that's what we're going to talk about. For the purpose of this video, I will use our tool, BC Designer Online, and I will also use a template that we have for innovations. You can find this on this link. And also, if you instead of watching this video, if you prefer to read article where we discuss all these ideas in detail, you can find it on this address, and I will share the links in the description. So let's get started with the innovations. I have here a strategy map, but I prefer to start with this picture, an innovation pipeline. So how innovations happen in any organization. Normally we start with some kind of insight or some rough idea that someone has, and if this idea was a good one, sooner or later we end up with discussing this idea in some with our colleagues, and if our colleagues confirm that this idea is a good one, then we can expect that there will be some test of waters. There are some experiments where people are testing this idea, testing this hypothesis, and if the tests were successful, we can expect that certain prototype will be created, and if the prototype was successful on the market, we can expect that certain product will be created from that prototype. So we can certainly change this process according to the needs of specific organization, to a specific team. But in general, the approach is this one. So we move from some general idea to something specific, something very tangible that we can sell, that we can implement, that we can actually use inside our organization or to promote to the market. So that's the first way to quantify on innovations. Actually, we can track the conversion rates for all these levels. Yeah? So we can track the percent of the ideas that were converted from ideas, let's say on the level of idea to the level of discussion. Then we can track the percent of ideas that were converted from discussion to a very specific experiment, because discussion is not yet an experiment. We can talk a lot, but any discussion should end up with certain tests, with certain documents, with certain ideas, certain formalities, deadlines, of course, and that will give us a sense that this idea is moving on. And the same happens when we move from experiments to prototype and product. So around this, we can already build some metrics. We can quantify on this, and this will be one of the approaches. Another level that we can look more into another level is these two first levels. Actually, I think there are one of the most critical ones. So how do we get these ideas and how do we get these insights? In this case, we have to think about different stakeholders. Like here I have internal and external clients, management, competitors, marketing, regulators. So we'll look at different stakeholders. We think about different ways to communicate with them, and we come up with certain with different ways to get innovative ideas with all those stakeholders. Yeah? So yeah, you can get innovative ideas from your clients if you do regular surveys, and you can visit some industry conferences to get some ideas from your competitors, to exchange some ideas. So a lot of ways to improve on this. And getting back to this, through this picture, um, a general rule is that the success of innovation is defined by how fast you move from here to here, and what is the conversion rate on these stages. So if you can move from idea to a prototype in 1 week, then you have a very good innovative environment. If most of the ideas that your team generate are converted into a meaningful discussion, into experiments, later prototypes, then you have a very good innovative environment. Respectively, if it takes several years to get from insight to prototype, then you're in danger. And if most of the ideas or most of the discussions end up with nothing because of you don't have a budget, you don't have people, you don't have that, and so that's another risk factor for your innovative strategy. So that's an introduction, and let me switch to this strategy map. And this strategy map is a kind of example that you can use to formulate your innovative strategy. So most likely in your case, you will change this template according to your needs. So it's actually very easy. Just click here, pick here, remove something, move something, drag and drop, and so on and so forth. So the software use is actually very easy. So let me comment you about this strategy map and innovative strategy. First of all, I prefer to start with customer perspective. And let's talk about our goals first, without thinking too much about how we're going to quantify and measure them. So first of all, we need to decide who needs these innovations. And because we innovate not just to build some product, actually below there is some stakeholder who needs this product. So we innovate for internal customers, like end users of the product, and we also innovate for some external customers, let's call them that way. Yeah, so external customers are end users of your product, and internal customers are, well, it's your team, your partners, whatever. Yeah? And we can add more stakeholders here. For example, it can be a regulator, it can be some specific type of customer. You can add more goals here, but for the template, we're fine with 2 goals. Then, how do we innovate? We need to make sure that this pipeline is working very smoothly. Yeah, so that's why I have here this goal, pipeline for innovation. We can write a very detailed goal, like build a very fast or effective pipeline for innovation, but for the purpose of keeping it short, I just named it pipeline for innovation. Yeah. And thinking about the ways to make this pipeline innovation a success, we can define 2 sub-goals. One goal is related to this input. We want more ideas to be generated here. We want diversity of ideas. We want more stakeholders to generate ideas. And we want to work on this innovation pipeline to make sure the ideas go down fast. That's one point. Another point is that to change the innovative environment, we need it's not like it's not another business system. Yeah, it's about certain culture, it's about certain behavioral patterns, and we need to understand what behavioral patterns do we need, what behavioral patterns do we need to remove, do we need to change these things. So another theme that we're going to follow is related to making our behavior in terms of innovation more efficient and, as a result, more effective. Yeah. So two themes here. And finally, we need to understand what capabilities do we need to be able to deliver these goals. Yeah? So if we're talking about being more innovative, building a more innovative environment, then obviously we need to change something. And in most cases, it's about changing how your team is working, how your team is listening to your customers, how your team is suggesting these ideas, how your team is discussing these ideas, how you're innovating and making the prototypes, these things. Yeah, and this is one thing. And another thing is thinking about the same problems, but from the viewpoint of the culture, from the viewpoint of your behavioral patterns. So we need to obtain these capabilities to train our team on this. Yeah, and we do all this to deliver some value for the customers. And finally, we innovate. If we are a for-profit company, we innovate to increase certain financial results. If you are not a non-profit company, then you will innovate to achieve certain results, tangible results for the stakeholders that you will formulate here in a different way. So instead of finance, you will rename it to something like stakeholder interest or something like this. So that was an overview of our goals. And if I make this map smaller, you will notice that all goals have different colors. And in our case, we use different colors. I explain here below to reflect different strategic themes that we followed on this strategy map. So this map is built on 3 pillars of innovative strategy. 3 pillars of any strategy. First of all, we focused on customer intimacy, these 2 goals. Then we had operational excellence theme, and we also have product leadership theme that helps us to formulate product ideas better. Again, these themes, these pillars help us to understand better what our strategy is all about. Okay, now let's talk about how can we measure the innovative efforts. I think when the financial outcomes is everything is more or less clear. So obviously we expect to increase revenue if we implement, if we build new products. So that's one of the expectations. And one of the metrics that we measure here is this one, revenue from new projects. And if we're talking about innovations, we'll also talk about new patents, new technologies. So we can also track royalty income if we sell our new technologies to other companies. So it's a very generic measurements. Also, one of the reasons why companies innovate is to develop different revenue sources, to have not to be dependent on just one revenue source. And we map this in form of this initiative here. So if I click, I will have details. Developing different revenue sources. So you can put here some description, some budget, assign some person responsible, probably align some documents and things. Okay, so these are the financial goals. And these metrics, the financial metrics, are marked with a gray color. If I scroll down, you will see that gray color stands for lagging indicators, the indicators that help us to validate the results. But we also have a leading indicator, the indicators that help us to validate our input to achieving this goal. And in this case, the leading indicator is coming from the goal below. Value for external clients is a leading indicator for this goal, for increasing revenue. Another goal that we have here is cutting costs. So the login metric in this case is cost optimized, and the leading one, again, it comes from the level below. And when these goals are contributing to the goal that we have here and help us to validate our financial sustainable strategy in terms of finance. Here we have some more leading goals that help us to make this innovative pipeline more quicker and more effective. And these metrics are related to budgets. We need to have R&D budget. We need to have a budget for capturing ideas and generating ideas. And of course, we need budget for this, for experiments, for testing ideas. Okay, so we have these metrics. And in terms of leading and logging performance, the software helps me a little bit, and it calculates for me the leading performance for the goal and the logging performance for the goal. So, for example, taking into account this goal, increase revenue, I see here this small gray sector. This actually logging performance of the goal that is calculated using these two metrics, these two logging metrics. And the leading performance is calculated using this leading metric. Okay. Now we have financial goals. Now, to achieve these financial goals, what should we do? What should we provide to our clients? We have external clients, our partners, our team. Here we have internal clients, our team, our partners, and we have external clients, our end users. How do we quantify this? How do we quantify innovations in the context of these customers? Again, when we're thinking about quantifying it, we need to quantify the leading factor and the logging factor, the logging results. So the leading factors, the leading indicators come from this goal, the pipeline for innovation. So now we need to decide how we quantify the results. How do we verify that our innovations actually helped end users? And how do our innovations actually help our partners? Again, I don't know your product. I don't know what your service is about. So I put here some general metric like perceived value metric. Yeah, what it might be. For example, for our software for BC Designer, one of the recent innovation was to implement video tutorials for all important features of the software. So if I, for example, click here, I have here this small icon, and if I click on it, I will get to the page with a training video. So people don't need to ask to contact us always with the questions. Because people don't like reading manuals. People want to have some natural style guidance. So what would be an innovative metric in this case? How would our clients perceive this innovation? They would perceive it by eliminating this need to contact us. And it's not a problem when you need to contact some company. The problem is that you need to wait for the answer. So they are perceiving it by the time reduction that they have. So they don't need to wait for the answer. When they struggle with certain functions, they just click and open the video, and that's it. So that's how they perceive it. In your case, it might be different metrics. So think about this. And actually, it's one of the initiatives that I formulated here. We need to understand how do people perceive innovation that we are going to implement. Because customers don't care about what you do, what you provide to them, unless they understand what is the value for them. And when you get this connection, you can quantify this. The same happens for internal clients, like our employees, our team. A good idea about team that we can actually have a better dialogue with them. We can interview them. We can ask more questions. With customers, typically the number of questions that we can ask is limited. Okay, moving to internal processes perspective. Here we have a pipeline for innovation goal, working on this, and to make this goal happen, we have two sub goals. So let's talk about different ways to quantify on this. First of all, in terms of involving stakeholders in idea generation, we're talking about these levels, the level of insight and the level of idea. So we can quantify here on the ideas that people were able to generate, obviously. Then we can quantify on the diversity of the sources that we have here. Yeah? If we have just one source of idea and just one client or two clients that share ideas with us, it's not a good option. And how do we know that people share ideas with us? We can do surveys, we can do phone calls, we can do personal meetings with clients, we can visit conferences, many things. So one of the logging metrics to measure how involved we are, how involved stakeholders are in idea generation, is to quantify, to measure the number of touch points with stakeholder. Yeah? So if we have many touch points with our, for example, our employees, then we can expect that we'll have many ideas suggested by employees, and we can expect a diversity of ideas. Yeah. So these are the logging metrics. Here, we need to change our culture. We need to develop certain behavioral patterns focused on innovations. How can we do this? First of all, I have mapped here an initiative that is review of the behavioral patterns. Before changing anything, we need to make sure that we that we know what is working now and what is broken, what needs to be changed, what needs to be removed. So we need to do an analysis. Now, how do we know that we actually developed and implemented the necessary behavior patterns? Yeah. So after this review, we might find certain number of improvement points. So we can quantify on this. If we did a review and everything looks fine, probably we didn't try hard enough. Yeah. So another thing that we can track, it depends on specific change that we have found, is to align certain metric with that change. Yeah, for example, if you found out that your team is too slow in answering customer queries, then the change metric might be related to this. Okay, so logging metrics for this. These two goals contribute to this goal in the form of leading metrics. I see it here. And how do we measure this? Pipeline for innovation, improving pipeline for innovation. Again, I have here two initiatives. Improve the way the hypothesis is formulated, the innovative hypothesis, and improving the way the hypothesis are tested and formulated. So that's what we want to do. We want to improve here the experiments, the ideas, the formulation of this. Okay, so what do we use to measure this? Yeah, so we can use the metrics that I have mentioned before. We can measure the conversion rates between these different stages. And we can also measure the different indicators related to the pipeline index, the time that we need to move from one step to another, the percent, the conversion rate. So basically, these are the main metrics for this pipeline. Okay, so pipeline index. Yeah, and actually, the pipeline index is an interesting thing. How should we build it? Right? I built it here. As you can see, this branch is not visible on the strategy map because it's disabled. It's not displayed on the map. But inside, I have all these metrics, and conversion rates, and we can calculate if needed. Have here possibility to use formulas to calculate these conversion rates. And later we can decide that, for example, this factor should be taken into account with a weight of 20%. This factor should be taken into account with a weight of 70%. And all this will be forming a certain number, an innovative index that we can use in some way. So in your case, the innovative index might be different. For example, you can build it on being very fast in processing the ideas and moving from idea stage to experiment stage. You can build your index around this, giving the weight of this indicator, the maximum weight to this indicator, the idea to systematic discussion rate. And respectively, having the maximum weight, this indicator will lead to having this innovative index. So this index is something that you build exclusively for your organization. But as I mentioned before, you have several standard options. One is to use the conversion rates, probably with different weights, so that you know that moving from this to this, where you need to work, where the highest weight is. And another metric, another typical metric, is to track the time that you need to move from one stage to another. Okay, so that's internal perspective. Some ideas here, conversions, time, diversity of ideas, touch points, metrics related to the change that you plan to introduce in your organization internally. Finally, we mentioned that we need to have certain capabilities. We need to train our team to be innovative. How can we do this? On BSc Designer, we have a separate article about measuring training efforts, and it's about following a four-level model. So one, we measure the immediate engagement of the training. Then we measure how what was the impact of the training. Then we measure what was the change in the behavior, and then we measure what was the real impact on the business. So that model is reflected here. First of all, we can measure the percent of employees who passed training for innovation. I think it's better to change it to make it a leading metric. It's not lagging metric, it's leading one. Then we have training engagement index. In some way, you will find out if people, let's say, like this training. There are different ways to measure this. Basically, you can just do exit polls to find out if people liked what they have learned about. Then you can measure the training exam score to find out if actually people learned what the training was about, learned their takeaways of the training. And the training is supposed to promote certain ways of doing things. And after some time, you can track if your team actually changed the way they're doing things, changed the way they're innovating. So that's the most important metric. Probably in this indicator, it makes sense to separate the weights, assigning the weight in this way. So I think the engagement is important, but I would give the weight 10%. The minimal training, the exam score, it's important, but 20%. But what is really important is if your team actually change the way they behave. Okay, so here we have it. That's for this goal, for line level employee capabilities. What about management capabilities? Again, the same trainer could do some training for the company's management, and in this case, the training would be focused on changing these behavior patterns. Again, it's hard to quantify without knowing the details of the business and without knowing the certain aspects. Okay, So that's a very quick overview of innovative strategy. If you want to have details, I would recommend for you reading this article. And a few words about how the automation software can help you with this. First of all, when you will reuse this template for your innovative strategy, you will have a very visual picture of what's happening, of how you want to focus your innovative efforts. And it's very easy to discuss this with your team, having this picture. Then you will have certain indicators. You can use the one that you saw, or you can just simply add more indicators to your innovative pipeline, to your scorecard here. And whatever value you enter here, it's used to calculate the performance of the goal, the performance of the perspective. All these calculation software does automatically. And no need to enter this data manually. You can always import this data from MS Excel or spreadsheet software, or you can connect to your databases using SQL indicators, or you can use RESTful API for some seamless connection with other business systems. The software allows you all this. So you have a strategy map, you have a KPIs that are calculated. For some KPIs, you can specify certain initiatives, you can do basic strategic planning, assign some budgets here, assign some timeline. Also, all this software allows you to do. Then, when you have some data, you can build a dashboard using this data. So here I have some example of the dashboard, and for example, here I see how my innovation pipeline index was changing. So it was growing, and we can actually track how it was growing. You can track certain indicators, how the value was changing, these things. Another important thing about the software, if you compare it to, let's say, thinking about building all this scorecard, all this structure in Excel or in a spreadsheet software, or building it in a professional software, here you have some certain analysis that you have out of the box. So, for example, you can quickly track what metrics where the biggest gain or biggest loss. For example, I can see that revenue from new projects was 37% loss in my scorecard. Okay, so that's one application. You can track, because here with software you can assign a certain update interval to the indicators, like updated monthly, and the software helps you to track that all indicators are up to date. You can forecast the values of indicators using historical data. You can find the best, worst performing indicators, and you can do all this. Finally, if you should plan to involve your team. Here on Alerts tab, you can link certain notifications to certain indicators. So, for example, you can link something to Innovation Pipeline Index, and if it is in the red zone, someone will receive a notification, and you will know this. Or you can align certain initiative with a goal, and you can set up a notification so that people responsible for this goal will have information they need. Of course, you have some reports, you have some tools, and if you go to your scorecards, you will be able to create more strategies, not just for innovation. You will be able to create more strategies, link different strategies together by data or by business goal, and of course set up some access rights to the scorecard, to the indicator, these things. So to summarize, we have discussed how a typical innovative pipeline looks like. We have discussed different ways to quantify innovative environment, how innovative your environment is. We have discussed different ways to improve your innovative environment, and one of them is to achieve diversity in the number of ideas and diversity in number of contact points with your stakeholders. This chart helps to get started. And finally, we discuss the innovative strategy, how all these can fit your the strategy of your organization. So we're not just doing innovations; we are achieving certain goals that we're doing certain improvements that our clients are looking for, internal and external clients, and these improvements help us to finally achieve certain goals, financial goals, for example. That's all that I wanted to discuss in this video. And yeah, on the top, of course, we need to have certain inspiring mission statement. Like in my case, it maintain an appropriate innovative environment. In your case, I think you will change it to something else. Yes, that's all I wanted to discuss in this video. I will share the links to this template and to this article. And should you have any questions, any questions about this innovative scorecard or using the BC Designer software, feel free to get in touch with us.